So the PTB dev update dropped the day I'm writing this, and the Xenomorph got absolutely gutted, like French Revolution taken out to the guillotine and got it brought down with a swiftness. Essentially, the devs decided that they would not only make landing tail attacks harder, but they are also going to make it to where you just don't have a tail attack, period, which is... well, I'm not going to mince words here, it's really stupid. So I was hanging out in Bran, aka the Mr. Headache stream, and I got to thinking, counterplay that rips killers out of their power is dumb. More specifically, counterplay that's built into the killer. I've said for ages that both Ghostface and Unknown needed reworks to their counterplay because having no power simply because you were perceived feels unintuitive and frustrating from the killer's perspective. I mean, both of these killers have a massive problem. With Ghostface, you can be revealed from what feels like behind 3 rocks and the next trial over, and there's just basically fuck all you can do about it. Bada bing, bada boom, you were stared at from an angle you couldn't tell, and now you don't have a power for the next X amount of seconds. And with Unknown, it somehow feels, I don't know if it feels worse, but it definitely feels bad, because somebody could be staring at you while you're in chase. They could be staring at you from an angle you don't see. But what's even worse is when they're staring at you and then they go behind a wall, or you go behind a wall, and they still cleanse because there is for some reason a 1.5 second buffer on the reveal. It's just really dumb. It's a really bad way. But as I sat there, I realized those aren't the only two that I have an issue with. Ghostface and Unknown for sure, but also Singularity and Xenomorph all have counterplay that essentially says, screw you, you get no power. Now, while Ghostface is obviously the worst of the 4 because Ghosty only has his stalk, Unknown has the TP, Singularity can reapply the pods quickly, and Xenomorph has map traversal, it still seems odd to me that the counterplay to these killers involves completely turning off their power. In other instances of counterplay, the power just becomes weaker. A great example of this is Vecna. The items give you advantages against Vecna when he uses his power. Or another great example of this would be Plague. Whenever you cleanse the Plague Fountain, it gives her red puke. But if you choose not to cleanse it until the last moment, which is the counterplay to her, then you just leave her as an M1 killer. It doesn't necessarily turn her power off. She still has the passive part of her power. You see what I'm saying? And then there's other instances where you can theoretically take a killer out of their power, like Legion and Plague's Corrupt Purge, for example, can get stunned out of theirs, but then that's just a skill requirement. You have to bait and win the bait on the killer to get the stun. But for the 4 mentioned, it's just stare at them for 2 of them, get item with insane range for 1 of them, and the last one, the Xenomorph in particular, takes the most thought. Or at least it did before the PTB changes, where you have to think about the item placement, but in the end, the effect is still the same. If the counterplay is done correctly, you just get to play M1 Marty for a bit until it comes back, and that doesn't feel good. While Ghostface is a bit harder to work around, I have ideas for the other 3. For Singularity, EMP should only take the goop off your back, and the cameras should have a different penalty, like either having their range reduced, or maybe the charge time to apply the goop takes a little bit longer when it's being EMP'd. For Xeno, I think the turret should apply a hinder and crawler mode should just be its form. I think the standing form is kind of dumb and no one really ever wants to be in it because why would you just want to be 115 lizard with hands? So I think if the turrets actually just slowed down the Xenomorph and made its walking speed a little worse, they would still do what they needed to do, but you wouldn't just take away its power. And for the Unknown, I've been saying this since the Unknown's release, you should be able to cleanse the weakness by cleansing the clones. Up the number of max clones for the Unknown and let the aura of the clones be map-wide for the survivors while they're weakened, and bada bing, bada boom, you now have a counterplay that makes some sort of sense that isn't really frustrating for the killer. Again, Ghostface is harder. I think they would have to add a whole new dynamic, possibly item-based to him, but I just think that overall, the idea of turning off a killer's power just isn't the way to go, and it further proves it with these Xeno changes. The entire point of the turret system was to knock Xeno out of their ability to use the tail attack because tail attack was so strong, but in one foul swoop, they've nerfed the tail attack and made turrets this monstrous counterplay to where you get to play 115 Lizard with Claw for most of the match. I think Behavior needs to ditch the removal of powers as a form of counterplay and instead look at counterplay that hinders the killers in some way, not necessarily the status effect precisely, just something that makes their job a bit harder. That way, it doesn't feel like you don't get to play the game. This is the main reason that somebody like Trapper is so miserable to play, because of how easy he is to counter for how much setup you have to put into him. It makes him feel worthless and you feel like you got punished just for selecting a certain character. And that's how these counterplays feel sometimes. It's not as severe, except Ghostface, I mean, Jesus fucking Christ. But the point I'm making is that we should be encouraging power usage, not turning it off every now and again. I think the main issue really stems from the fact that Behavior, for whatever reason, likes to try and remove thinking from the game. I think this game is at its best when you have to use your brain. One of the reasons I hate palette spam design so much is because maps that are full of palettes, like Gideon's, Hawkins, Greenville, etc., play themselves. It's simply run to palette and drop, run the palette and drop. And while I don't think gamers should have to get a master's degree to play the frickin' game, I do think that for a game that is mostly about knowledge checks, attempting to remove the thought process from counterplays isn't a good idea, and I'd be just as annoyed if they did this on the killer side. If they made a map that had 2 loops in it and no god palettes, I think the map would be awful and would immediately need a change. A game that plays itself is for mobile devices and cozy games, where you use them as a distraction while doing other things, not for PvP focused games. But let me stop rambling. Let me know what you guys think. I'm sorry for the more negative video today. I promise the next one will be a ton of fun. But as always, a great big special thank you to my channel members listed on screen now. If you want to find out how to become a channel member today, get awesome perks like seeing videos early, merch discount codes, and more, then please click that join button down below. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one.